Is there a way you can teach me to find my own visual language?
I think the more art you look at, the more you'll understand other people and the more you'll understand yourself. And I think that is just the best, like, simplest way to do that. It's like almost automatic. You don't even have to like do much else. If you're curious and interested in art, like the more you know about it, the more you see, like that'll just come into your work too. And then I think just by making and doing things, that's all you have to do is like, I think for me, like aside from that, the best advice I would have is to just to make things and not always overthink it too. I think for me, it's like making and then thinking is how I like to work.
Have you ever like been overthinking a lot?
Oh yeah, I overthink.
Wow, that surprised me because you made a lot of work. Like when you were telling me, okay, I don't have much work in my studio than this.
Oh yeah, no, normally I have a lot more work. Yeah, I'm always thinking a lot about all kinds of different things. I think art making is like the one place where I just let myself do anything, and I don't really have any restrictions there. Like where I think it's like become a place of like I'll just make something and then look at it and try to understand what it is. I don't always like show everything I make, but like I think the making part is like a special thing where it's like, oh, you can just make something and then helps you understand yourself better. I just think like the more you do that, the better. I guess everything else is like external, like where if other people are going to like respond or understand what you're doing, like it's kind of out of your control too. So like, but I think the more you know like the things that you love, like I think for me, I didn't start looking at art seriously until I was older. I didn't live in a place where we had like great museums close by or anything. So like once I came to New York, it's like going to a museum. It's like it totally like changed the way I understood art making. Just like look at art and make it, and like it's pretty straightforward. But I think that is the best thing to do.
I see. What's the cure of overthinking?
The cure of overthinking? Well, I don't think I have it yet.
Okay.
But within art, I think, let me think for a second.
Don't overthink.
This is a good question because
I actually think you already found the cure, and
maybe,
it's working.
Yeah.
在最初接触奥森利的时候，你会快速勾勒出一个符合流行文化叙事、脸谱化的艺术家形象。他简单纯粹，心无旁骛，眼前只有绘画这一件事儿。但很快，在访谈的过程中，我意识到他并不擅长面对镜头，看得出来他脑海里的思路翻山越岭，最终想要诉说的却滞留在路口。我也拖延了很久，没有去碰这些录制下来的素材，因为我知道，如果要获得流畅简练的一段访谈，我需要花费大量的时间，通过剪辑将他游走的思绪穿针引线。但也正是在一遍又一遍过着这些访谈片段的过程当中，我意识到，真正有价值的部分，恰好在这些因思绪的跳跃而产生的留白当中。我想，一个面对镜头诸多压力，也不擅长口头表达的人，他选择接受采访的邀约，正是因为曾经经历，所以才懂得，愿意让更多的人能够在与他曾经相似的境遇里，获得一份宽慰和笃定。而此前，我一直认为，纯粹是一种可遇而不可求的天分，能够在一件简单的事物中看到意义，而后对这个小世界之外的问题，比如世俗眼光中的艺术家何为，再比如艺术安能大庇天下寒士俱欢颜，通通视而不见。但在这段你即将看到的谈话里，你会跟我一样意识到，奥森利的专注与纯粹，恰恰是他刻意努力的结果。也许正如他所选择的媒介喷枪，并以此早在10几年前便定义了一种描绘数字世界景观的绘画风格。这是一种在画布上呈现痕迹时容不得半点犹豫和妥协的媒介，不断向内求索，把那些被模仿、被质疑、所有的自我怀疑，通通转化成自我加码和加压，然后心无旁骛，一气呵成。当谈到艺术家并非一种职业，而是一种生活状态时，我们都不约而同想到了西西弗斯的寓言。我曾一直认为这是个悲剧，身负重担，功亏一篑，循环往复。但在与奥森的这场谈话里，我却意识到，也许这恰恰是一种幸运。终其一生，他都在路上，也都清楚地知道，他要往山顶去。
From my point of view, I can see a whole generation of younger artists following your path. of like tapping on imagery that exist in the digital world and then using like spray paint and everything. So how do you feel about like your certain painterly vocabulary being followed and being studied in that sense?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of interesting because like that's been something that over 10 years, like I think when you first start doing your work, you're not really thinking about that at all. Like it's something it's kind of surprising when it happens. The most interesting thing that happens, and like I've seen this with some of my friends too that have had maybe some influence on younger painters, where like people kind of sometimes see what other people are doing connected with what you're doing.
Right.
And it almost like changes like what you're like the way people perceive you also. That's been the most interesting thing, where it's someone else might maybe be into the aesthetic of something and then they might not understand like the core part. I was surprised to see that, how like the aesthetic can just be kind of like reused in like all kinds of ways that like, you know, they're a different person, so they're not really coming at it the same way. So that's just something that's surprising. I think that's just normal, like how like art just like over time in like kind of like spreads to different people, but then like everybody's kind of coming at it a different way. So like someone sometimes will tell me like, oh, this looks like your work, but then I will like have no connection with it, like and then I'll be like, okay, like that's surprising. But there's people, I guess, that like you can tell like are like genuinely like really kind of like curious and like pushing into a new direction, and like like I'll sometimes see things that people have done and then like maybe they might have been a little influenced, but then they'll take it into a new place, and then like that'll in turn like influence me or like be interesting. Like I think that's like the best version of it when I see that happen, where it's like, or I'll be like, oh, I didn't really push that as far as I could have, like seeing like maybe like I'll touch on one thing once and then like someone else will like build off that, like a whole body of work or something, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, like I thought I really like maybe I thought like I was doing something in that, but I just kind of didn't go far enough. But overall, I feel like that's kind of like the idea of art is like it's like this visual language that we share. Yeah, it's like a kind of a great thing when you you start seeing that like you have that kind of impact, that like, oh, like you can do something and then that can actually change the way other people are like seeing things. Like you're like one small person in the world, and like that's like one moment in life where you're like, oh, that actually like you can have an impact. Like if you're building a body of work, like when you start seeing like, oh, there's younger generations that are looking at that, that becomes like, you realize you're building that like culture in a certain way. When I was younger, it's like, oh, who I was looking at, and like they seemed like to me like they've been around forever, but maybe they had only been working for 5 or 10 years or something, and then it's just like kind of like this cycle of things where we're all like kind of learning and sharing from each other. But yeah, anyway, it's definitely like, yeah, it's been interesting to see that. I guess like,
and it's a good thing, right?
I think overall it's good. I guess it's like, because I'm using like say like an airbrush, like to reference like like digital sometimes, like where some people might use an airbrush just to make a painting, and I think that's like the difference, where sometimes I'll be like, oh, that's like not quite coming from the same place, but like someone else might see it as the same. And like I guess for me that's the interesting part, where it's like helps me even see what I'm actually interested in too, because the variables start getting like overlapped. You can like see it a little bit, or even something that I might for myself take for granted. Like I'd just be like, oh, I'm just gonna do this without thinking. Like where then I'll start being like, oh, okay, I'm actually, that's why I'm doing that, because it has this meaning. So anyway, yeah,
that's great. I think that work of yours is called Mirror. That was a man looking into the computer, right?
Yeah.
I think that is relevant to how technology and social media can be something mirroring your desire and everything. That piece actually reminds me of another like early work from Nam June Paik.
Okay.
He made a Buddha sitting in front of a CCTV, and the Buddha was like watching himself, and there was a camera like pointing towards the Buddha.
Oh yeah, that's good. I mean, I don't actually know that piece, but yeah, that's like, I think that's kind of the same idea for sure. It's like this kind of like self-aware of yourself, but also in this technology also.
So the relevance in between these works actually push me to think deeper into your work. I think no matter like what new technologies you have been involved into your process of making art, there's one classical painter always there. I somehow have the feeling. So do you think you're a painter like primarily?
Yeah, definitely. Like I would definitely say that. I always think of everything I do from like a painter's lens. Even when I make sculpture, I think there's some like painters that I think make great sculptures, like, and they're coming at it from a painter's perspective, like someone like Matisse or something. Like
Right.
they're great sculptures, but like they're like a painter's idea of like sculpting. But yeah, I think for me, like everything I do is like that. Even when I make digital work, it's like I try to bring like a painterly idea to that. Even just using like digital software, it's like I try to think of it as how can I use this for painting and to make like painting language.
So you think like a painter all the time.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. Yeah. So everything I do, I'm like thinking from that perspective. I remember early on when I started making like digital images, like using Photoshop and using like digital tools. Like people would ask like, oh, why don't you just print these out? Or like that was like kind of a question. But like for me, this does not seem interesting at all. Like making the painting is like the most interesting part. And like for me, I love making paintings. So like for me, like the other part is just the like steps to get to the
Right.
painting. Like for me, it's always like, yeah, the painting part is where I'm like really actually interested in, and like the other stuff I'm always like exploring, and I think that's exploring like thinking and like culture and different ideas. But yeah, it's like for me, I can't go without painting for sure. At the end of the day, like I think even for me as a human, like painting has like almost like a meditational quality, like where I can relax and kind of think clearly, like where like maybe I don't think as clearly in other ways in my life, like where it's like almost like if I'm traveling or something I can't paint, then I go a little crazy, and then when I get home it's like I can get back to work.
Do
and
you
then,
like pack like paints or brush?
oh no, I just like I'll bring sketchbooks and stuff, so I'll sketch ideas, but it's different from like just sitting and making a painting. It's like it's kind of like my brain goes to a more kind of like quiet place that's
Right.
it just feels relaxing. I feel like it's a way to like kind of like slow down your thoughts and just like be focused on one thing. So yeah, it's something that I just like feel like need to do as a person. It reminds me like if I do I like do sports maybe sometimes like with like boxing or something, like I would like when you have like that muscle memory where you don't have to think at all. You're just like kind of have this like all the things you've learned you can just act. And like painting can be like that too, like where it's like it's not like you're not thinking, but it's like thinking coming from like the unconscious or something. It's like this like built like all the things you already learned. It's not like it's like almost like a deeper way of thinking instead of like the front of the brain. It's like the back or something, like where I think it's like a way to access that. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like something that is the only other way I know how to get to that place. So
I'm curious, when did you know that you're gonna do it like full time?
to be honest, it's never like a moment. It's more like a hope or something. I think when I was younger, it's not something I even realized you could do. Like it's just something that I always have done. And like when I was younger, I had like day jobs and stuff, and like would just like get home and make paintings. Yeah, when I first moved to New York, I had like my first show. I had like a day job, and then I had a second show coming up, and I realized like, oh, if I don't quit this day job, I might not be able to get all the work done for the show. And it almost just became more practical to work full time. And luckily, like financially, I was able to sell work from that first show, like where it still felt like a risk to quit the day job, but I felt like, okay, this is this moment where I should take that risk and just go for what I really love. And for me, like I'm not gonna regret quitting a job I didn't like. So that was like kind of the moment where I was like, okay, like this, like I should probably. It just felt like a clear path. It's like, oh, you can go down a path you don't like or a path that you prefer, and like being a painter is just like a way of life. Like whether you're like, you're just always thinking about it, doing it, no matter what, like whatever stage I'm at in my life. Like I've feel like whenever I had day jobs before, I would just like paint when I got home and stuff. So it's like it's just a constant way to like process the world, I think.
I'm wondering, how do you decide the scale of these paintings?
That's a good question. You know, I feel like at this point I kind of just know like what it should be, but I think for a while I would like sometimes try something big and then try it small. Like I think the scale is really important, but I think it depends on what the subject matter is. Like
Right.
some things like how your body like is connected with it, like where like if I want it to be like more intimate or something, like then I'll make it smaller, like it's like a window you're looking at. Like sometimes I'll have like a large painting that it's like if you have a huge painting that's like all red, it's like you actually just have like a reaction to, like if you're looking at the sunset or something, it's just like has a physical reaction on your body, which is different if it's like a small painting. I guess what I do sometimes is like I have like the VR space too, like where if I'm planning a show, like I might like walk around in the VR space and like look at the like paintings in that space.
I think scales matters a lot. But unfortunately, like nowadays, people like look at a lot of paintings or artworks online. So we all kind of lost the sense of the actual scale of an artwork.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I think, like, now that you mentioned it, I'm thinking about is, I guess, like, the size of, like, the gesture. Like, one thing I've been experimenting with oil paint lately, but I've been using airbrush for a really long time. And, like, I think through using both, like, one thing I noticed that with the airbrush is, like, you can get, like, these, like, big gestures really quickly with, like, the airbrush that, that I really love. And, like, even, like, at a large scale, like, I can make, like large marks that are like very quick and like get like the flow of my body like in the painting, like where with a brush it's like different, it's like has its own quality that's like really beautiful, but like even with like a huge brush I can't make the same kind of mark as fluid, I think. So for me that's like a part of scale that I guess I've been interested in too, and like even just like thinking about like, okay, what do each of these like different mediums do well. And like I think like the largest paintings I make, I think when they're using the spray gun, I think that's like a beauty to it that you sometimes like you wouldn't, if you saw that tiny on a screen, like you don't get the sense of like that mark or like that, oh, that's just one, like, you know, like one big gesture, like you can lose that. But I think that's a frustrating thing in general, is that we experience a lot of things without actually seeing it, like where, especially with paint, I think that's like, for me, the point of painting is like it's a physical object, like where
and we tend to forget about it nowadays, right? About like painting being a painting rather than merely an image.
Like I was in London recently and saw this like Van Gogh show that I was like blown away by, and like I've seen a lot of those paintings from images first, and like even though like I know like, oh, it's not the same as seeing it, it's like when you really see it, it changes the way you experience it. But it's hard to like, since we're so like it's so easy to see images, it's like like, you know, I would prefer to see a digital image than nothing at all. Like I think overall that's how I feel, like where I'd rather see a painting, like if I can't go to where it is, like it's better just to see an image of it. But yeah, it's like kind of in your head, it almost feels like you're familiar with it without actually being familiar with it. I think that's the problem with, that's something I've just heard people say about my work too, like where like they said like they were really familiar with it in digital images, and then they're surprised in person it was like different from what they expected, like where, so that's something that is like, I think that's just a reality of the world we're in right now. That's why for me though, it's like so important to like make physical objects that are really like beautiful and what they are, and that the like there is something special about, for making a painting with like pigment, and like the pigment's beautiful. It's like, I think that's why I've kind of been exploring oil painting too, because of like trying to like figure out those things, like, oh, like the beauty of like the material itself. It's not like we lose all that, but I think for me it's more like, oh, I really appreciate that when then you like get to see the things in person, really.
I have the same feeling when you were like talking about like, oh, sometimes you think that certain works is another size in your head, and then you see the actual thing and then blow your mind. I have the same feeling with definitely Mona Lisa and one tiny Dali painting. I did MoMA. I thought it was really big, and then it was like this. Layers of the audience standing in front of that. I never get a chance to get closer to that painting.
Sometimes it's funny, especially with like small paintings, it's like almost the opposite, like with the digital image, where you can actually see more, because it's like they might have like a like a huge photo of it that you
Right.
can see all the details.
Right.
Where like you never could see that. Like you're not even probably allowed to get close to it usually. So then you aren't able to get that, like see all those details. So it's like, yeah, that's just, like something that's very strange. I think it's not just in painting either too. Like the world in general is like we like have all this access to different information or things, but like even like something like Google Maps, I use that all the time.
Right.
And like it has this like false sense of reality. Oh, because it's like data somewhere that's like telling me something exists there.
Right.
But like I've never been there. Like I don't know if it's true or not, but I just assume it's fact. There's a lot of like things like that in the world that like you take as fact, like
Right.
like that you've experienced only in this
Right.
like digital way. That like sometimes you go somewhere and like you expect it to be a certain way because like you've seen it online and then it's like really different. But like it almost, I guess that's like something that I think is interesting is like how that almost becomes more real in a certain way. Like in your mind, that's like, because some places you might not ever even go to, like where
Right.
if you've seen like some digital representation of it, it's like feels like fact or something, and then you might not ever even know if it's true or not. Like where, so I think that's just a strange world we're in today.
Maybe it's just my way of interpretation, but we have this mythology in China about there's one old fool. I remember when I was looking at the title.
I guess like for me, like a lot of the ideas I have, I feel like it's nice when they're like interchange, like this, like I love that story that you're telling me, like where like that's kind of part of how I'll think about that, like trying to do something like impossible. I think
Right.
like sometimes painting feels like that. If you're trying to like really like just make something that like almost make it real, like something that's just like in your head, and it also feels like kind of like a futile thing sometimes. So it's like feels like foolish, or like it's like so much energy and time spent like where
Right.
it doesn't always make sense. So it's like it's like kind of like this like tongue-in-cheek kind of title in that way, like where I also think it's like I think making art is like probably one of, it feels like almost like useless, but also one of the most important things at the same time, like where I think that's like the complexity of it. Like there's so many things in the world you could do that are like harm other people. So for me, like to do like something that's just like inward and like just kind of like working through something personal, I think is like a really beautiful thing. Like for me, that's kind of where that title is coming from too, like where this idea of like in that story, like, you know, not everyone in that village understood that person, but they have like their vision that they're doing, and like it may or may not work out, but they know what they want to do or like what matters to them. So it's like kind of where that title came
Similar
from.
to Sisyphus, like trying to carry that burden
Yeah, I
all,
guess so.
all his life. I think it's artists, how artists are in a sense.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. Like, I feel like it's funny because like it's the kind of thing where people like, there's always that duality of like respecting that and like also like not respecting it too, in the same, like where it's like, it's funny because anytime you go to any city, it's like people always go to the museum. Like like once someone's in the museum, like we have such like reverence for artists, and like it's like really like whole cultures are built around like what art people have made, and like it's so important in that way. But then like through most of my life, if like you meet a new person, they ask you what you do, like you might say you're an artist, and they like kind of roll their eyes, like where there's like a funny thing about that, where it's like it's the kind of thing that unless you have what other people might consider like success or something, like a lot of people wouldn't respect it in the same way. Like sometimes it can feel like hopeless too, like where if you like, you know, especially when there's so many complicated things in the world, and is this even helping anything, like you can feel a little bit like hopeless sometimes. So anyway, all of that is like what's kind of built into that title. And like I think with my paintings, they're not like trying to like force like a like idea on anyone too, like where it's like those are just like ideas that I'm kind of like struggling with or dealing with, like where it's like in the work kind of just processing it, and like that's just like kind of what I'm thinking and like dealing with, and then it's like sharing that with other people.
I see. I think it's so easy to appoint yourself to be an artist, but yeah, like unless you have some certain level of establishment, couple of solo shows, or successfully support yourself solely on selling your works, then you qualified as an artist. Otherwise, people won't like take it seriously as a like career or occupation or whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, that's just like, I think, because like for me, it's more a way of thinking, I think. And like, I think
Yeah.
that's like how, yeah, that's like the beauty of it. But yeah, like, I think that's the complexity of that, like with like the external part of like how other people perceive. I think I think not everyone, that's maybe the beauty of it too, is that not everyone will understand what that is. You know, I think that's like, it's kind of like a personal journey that like you have to take and like figure out on your own. And like not everyone,
Right.
there's no like, not everyone knows where you're going to with it too. It's like
Right.
kind of like you're on your own little path to figure out what's important to you with it.
Right. I always have the feeling, especially when like nowadays, especially in like bigger cities, art market has become a big thing, and it's a lot more professionalized than before. So I think the idea of artist as a way of being and the idea artist as a career has been so split with each other.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it does feel split. You know, I've been in New York maybe 10 years now, and like it definitely feels like there's two separate worlds, like where there's
Right.
art and then the art market, and they sometimes overlap or intertwine, but like but they're not exactly the same thing. But I think you know, like when you see great art that you really moves you, like you know that it doesn't necessarily have to do with like the market or something. Like that's just something different. That for me is like really interesting when the NFT thing happened. I don't know. For a long time, I really appreciate like digital art, and like something I've been like struggling with for a long time. Like, how do you like make digital art that is like interesting? Like, it's funny because then once money got involved with it, people started taking that more serious, and then once it was like less money involved with it, people then didn't appreciate it. And it's funny how that is this strange thing that makes people look at something different. Like where like it's not like the work changed. Like there's definitely like all kinds of things that people were making that was like good and bad and like terrible and everything in between. Like but it's funny, like to me, like you could see like the birth of how those like concepts kind of happen for people, like where like something like like I would have some friends who like doing great work for a long time and maybe like undervalued and then suddenly valued a lot in that world, and then to see like like when the financial aspect changes, it's like okay, like it changed people's perspective on it pretty quickly, like where it's like, oh, that's how a lot of things are like that. Like what I think is like ways you actually like feel about something, like because of what it is, and then like then those like external viewpoints that are like get more complicated, that is like outside of what the work is, I guess.
Is there a way you can teach me to find my own visual language?
I think the more art you look at, the more you'll understand other people and the more you'll understand yourself. And I think that is just the best, like simplest way to do that. It's like almost automatic. You don't even have to like do much else. If you're curious and interested in art, like the more you know about it, the more you see, like that'll just come into your work too. And then I think just by making and doing things, that's all you have to do is like, I think for me, like aside from that, the best advice I would have is to just to make things and not always overthink it too. I think for me, it's like making and then thinking is how I like to work.
Have you ever like been overthinking a lot?
Oh yeah, I overthink.
Wow, that surprised me because you made a lot of work. Like when you were telling me, okay, I don't have much work in my studio than this.
Oh yeah, no, normally I have a lot more work. I'm always thinking a lot about all kinds of different things. I think art making is like the one place where I just let myself do anything, and I don't really have any restrictions there. Like where I think it's like become a place of like I'll just make something and then look at it and try to understand what it is. I don't always like show everything I make, but like I think the making part is like a special thing where it's like, oh, you can just make something and then helps you understand yourself better. I just think like the more you do that, the better. I guess everything else is like external, like where if other people are going to like respond or understand what you're doing, like it's kind of out of your control too. So like, but I think the more you know like the things that you love, like I think for me, I didn't start looking at art seriously until I was older. I didn't live in a place where we had like great museums close by or anything. So like once I came to New York, it's like going to a museum, it's like it totally like changed the way I understood art making. Just like look at art and make it, and like it's pretty pretty straightforward, but I think that is the best thing to do.
I see. What's the cure of overthinking?
The cure of overthinking? Well, I don't think I have it yet.
Okay.
But within art, I think, let me think for a second.
Don't overthink.
This is a good question because
I actually think you already found the cure. And it's
maybe,
working.
yeah. Well, actually, it's funny that now that I think about it, like, I think working on the computer, like digitally, is for me a cure because it's so, you can't really you can undo things. There's no like physical like loss or anything when you make something.
Right.
So for me that's kind of gave me a freedom to just like just like make anything in there and I don't think
Right.
about it. That's like I think that is really why I love like the digital form is that it's like feels like this place to really experiment and it just feels like an endless experimentation. So
Okay.
so maybe that would be a good place to start, like
Okay. Okay. Can I ask you to say the slogan of my channel?
Oh, sure.
Do you want to try the Chinese version?
Okay, yo, Tai Du.